Oh, wait, something loading. Okay, I should be live.
Yeah. For me.
Okay. Shall I begin?
Let me load it on my phone. I'm going to do it on my phone.
Weird. There isn't about a second delay.
I think it's not so bad though, especially with dealing with 30 before. Can you talk, Christine? I want to see how long the delay is.
Hello. Talking. Checking the delay. Hello. Checking. Hello. Test.
It's about
Got like 15 seconds or so.
it's less than that for me.
Okay. Well, maybe it's because of this. Right. Should we get up together and go on?
Yeah. Okay, will I just mute Gather in video?
Yeah, we'll just pull this together and then go away. Right.
Okay. Just getting all these tabs sorted. Okay, so welcome everyone. Gosh, it just took so much courage to be here today. Already you've taken a huge first step to manage whatever it is that you're facing right now. Just by being here, you're already showing that you have this huge drive to handle what you're going through. So just well done for taking that hard first step by literally taking action by clicking to join this session. We have about 15 minutes together today, and we're going to talk a little bit about what you're dealing with. And then hopefully get to some strategies that are going to help you feel a little bit calmer and just like you've got people behind you, because we're all here in this together. And I think it's just really powerful to know that you're not alone, no matter what you're dealing with. There's a whole group here also dealing with that. So you don't have to face this by yourself. Another thing just to note as we get started is that this is completely confidential. So no personal information is being recorded or tracked, and no one knows that you're here. So you can remain totally anonymous, and that goes even if you're participating. Your account's not attached to that. It's totally anonymous and confidential. So at the bottom of your screen, you see that you can contribute. So I'll be asking you some questions throughout our session today. You can answer some polls. You can throw out some emojis so that you can share how you're doing and what you're going through and do some reflecting. You can also just send out some good vibes to the group at any point just by clicking on the heart emoji. So whenever you just want to spread some love or you like something that we're talking about, go ahead and click that heart emoji. Gosh, what's joining? Which is just so inspiring, because you're alone in this problem, but look how many people are joining and look how many people care, because we're all here not just for ourselves to get this information, but just by joining, you've also taken part in a community where by participating and showing people what you're going through, you're actually helping other people also. So thank you for that. So let's start with a quick check-in. Go ahead and click the contribute button, look at the bottom of your screen, and just let us know how you're doing. You can pick anything from great to the worst. Just go ahead and let us know how you're doing. Okay. So it looks like everybody's doing about so-so. Not terrible, not great, just kind of somewhere in the middle, which is sometimes one of the hardest things to deal with when you're just kind of like, I don't feel quite myself, but I don't feel great. So it's really good to know. We'll be doing some check-ins and just kind of keep in touch with how you're feeling as we go throughout this session. So to kick us off, a lot of times when you're dealing with anxiety or depression or body image or relationships or really any kind of upsetting or unwanted emotion. A lot of times they come with really uncomfortable, intrusive, pestering thoughts that just keep popping into your mind. And sometimes these thoughts can even be pretty disturbing and distracting. So, to kick things off, I want to share a story about someone named Jordan who's dealt with these types of thoughts for a really long time and dealt with a lot of pain. I think it's important to tell you that Jordan's story was created by combining a lot of different stories of people struggling. So we wanted to protect everyone's identity. So we kind of mushed together a few different stories. But all of the thoughts and feelings and experiences in the story that I'm going to share with you is real, but the actual character of Jordan isn't real because we don't want to I don't know, expose what anybody personally is going through. So we've combined a couple of different stories, but the emotions and experiences are super real. So Jordan was about 16 years old and living in Toronto, Canada. And on the surface, seemed like things were going okay. She had friends, she was doing well in school. She was even the lead in her play and also posted a lot of videos online of her singing, which were really popular. And she was really well known in her school for how impressive her singing voice was. But beneath the surface, she was dealing with really upsetting images and thoughts that were popping into her mind at totally unexpected times. The thoughts popped in without any warning, and they were super dark, disturbing, and distressing. They made her just feel totally helpless and kind of like her life was spinning out of control. The thoughts grew stronger and stronger, and because they were so distracting and upsetting, and she was judging herself for having them, she kind of pulled back from her friends. And she felt like she had so much doubt and fear because of these thoughts that she lost touch with that version of her who was always singing and acting and doing really well in school. The thoughts got super overwhelming, especially at night when she would try to sleep. So as soon as she would try to relax is actually when the thoughts would pile on the worst, once she wasn't going through her day to day. And that's when she felt most overwhelmed. One night, it actually got so bad that Jordan began having thoughts of suicide because the chatter in her mind was just so exhausting. So even though she felt a lot of shame and she didn't want to tell anyone that she was having these thoughts before going through with her plan for suicide, she decided to try just one last thing by texting her best friend, Laura. Laura really listened to her just over text as they were talking back and forth, and Jordan told her everything that she was going through. And it wasn't until Jordan had this idea to share her thoughts with her friend that her friend suggested, why don't we do a little bit of research on this? I think Jordan was just so afraid to even open that up. She hadn't even read much about what these thoughts mean or what's going on with them. And the two of them sort of found together through their research that these thoughts are really common and that they're a symptom of a lot of mental health challenges, but they are not reflective of Jordan as a person. Just because she was having these dark or disturbing or upsetting thoughts, it didn't mean that she was a dark or disturbed person. They were just thoughts. And sort of changing that perception that there wasn't something broken or wrong with her really kind of helped her start reframing this. She also read something from a psychologist that was explaining that thoughts are just our synapses firing in our brain. They're not necessarily anything more than that. They're just synapses in our brain firing. And they don't necessarily mean something really big or important about who you are or where your life is headed. Sometimes we just have tens of thousands of thoughts. And if we are in a certain emotional state, we might pay attention to a lot more of those thoughts than we really need to pay attention to. So it's often just our mind being sort of over vigilant and paying a lot of attention and sort of being on guard rather than us having specific thoughts because there's something wrong or disturbed with us. So as she read more and more, Jordan started to realize that there really wasn't anything to be ashamed of. That her thoughts were just thoughts. Everybody has tens of thousands of them a day, and she couldn't always control what popped into her head, but she could start to learn to control how she reacted to the thoughts. So once Jordan kind of let go of a little bit of this shame, realizing that there's something wrong with her for having these, but she does want to work on how she can manage them, she decided to see her school counselor, Mrs. Patel. And in their sessions, Mrs. Patel helped Jordan understand that the thoughts were a product of her anxiety, actually. they weren't reflective of who she was. It was just her brain being on super protect mode, really trying to protect her by paying attention to every thought. So her brain was actually doing more than it needed to do. It wasn't something broken or wrong with it. It was her being actually overly attentive to things. So every time a thought popped up, she began to learn this strategy where she would pretend like she was a lawyer and kind of challenge the other side. So the thought would come up and suggest something, and then she would try to argue the other case, and work against the thought to see the evidence about it that maybe wasn't true. She also did a practice that she worked on with Mrs. Patel, where she kind of let the thoughts come into her mind and wash over her and then just leave. Because she noticed the more she tried to struggle and pull against them, the more she was telling herself and telling her brain, this is an important thought. Pay attention to this. Pay attention to this. Think more about it. And when she actually just let it sort of come into her mind, she said, oh, hey there, thought, and then leave her mind, she was actually noticing that the thoughts didn't stick around as much. So she just kind of let it come in, wash over her, and leave rather than really fighting against it. She also learned a lot of patterns and triggers by sort of looking at her last week or 2 weeks, where she was able to see that if she didn't take breaks from her schoolwork, or if she spent a lot of time on Snapchat, or if she didn't get a lot of sleep, that the thoughts became worse. So she kind of tried to work to cut them off by working on managing the thoughts, or sorry, behaviors that led to her having a lot of thoughts before they even popped up, which really helped a lot. She tried to take a lot of breaks. She put a reminder on her phone to take breaks from Snapchat, and she noticed that the thoughts weren't as bad when she did these things. I think it's really important to say that, this sounds like a perfect story that's just tied up in a bow. Jordan went through this really hard thing and now she's in this perfect place, but that's really not the case. She still really struggles with the thoughts today, but she has the tools to cope with them. So the thoughts still appear, but she's able to sort of intercept and manage and challenge them before they leave her feeling super distressed or totally overwhelmed. So I think that's the key, that sometimes this stuff doesn't just disappear overnight. You're not just going to learn a coping strategy like going on a walk and all of a sudden your mental health is going to be totally better. It's about just learning ways to slowly chip away at some of these patterns that are causing distress. So Jordan's story is a pretty common one. I think most of us here can probably relate to having these unwanted or uncomfortable thoughts that are overwhelming or tiring. So if you can relate to Jordan's story, go ahead and hit the thumbs up at the bottom of your screen. Okay, wow. Kind of surprised, but also kind of not surprised that everybody here, 100% of you who are here in this session can relate to Jordan's story. That's pretty incredible. And just goes to show that we're all dealing with this stuff. I think we carry a lot of shame around it and we think we're alone in this. But I mean, this is proof right here. You can see every single person in this session is dealing with that. So let's dig in a little bit more. Have a little bit of a think around what did you relate to specifically? Because I think Jordan's story is really common and a lot of us can relate to different pieces of it. So what particularly for you stood out about her story? You can just go ahead and read through some of those options and take your time to just click one thing or a couple things that you related to about her story. Okay. So it looks like the thing that's really standing out to me is that the bothersome thoughts and asking someone for help things a lot of people connected with. So it's great that you could find something really specific there that resonated with you in Jordan's story. I think, that's also just really impressive. Asking for help isn't easy. I think just like Jordan dealt with, there's a lot of shame around it. We think somebody's going to think we're crazy or that we're really disturbed or they're going to lock us up or they're going to call the police or they're going to not want to be friends with us anymore. But I think just what we saw on that last slide there, that last exercise, is that everybody deals with this stuff. We don't talk about it all the time, but most people out there, if not everybody, deals with this stuff. So there's not a lot to be ashamed of because it's just part of being human. And it's just about, reaching out to people to connect so you don't have to be alone in this. So if the unwanted thoughts are making you sort of feel isolated or ashamed, is that there are some different exercises we can do. You might have heard one from Jordan's story, but we're going to also work on some together today. So to be thinking about what exercise is most effective for you, the first thing to think about is if you were able to manage your thoughts or manage whatever it is you're going through, whether that's thoughts or overwhelming emotion or anything else, I want you to take a second to think about what hope do you wish would come true the most? If you were to wake up tomorrow and your greatest hope of sort of managing whatever brought you here today had been managed, what would that look like? So there's a few options you can select from at the bottom of your screen that sums up most people's hopes in sort of dealing with their mental or emotional health. But you can also select something else if none of this really sums up what you're hoping to get from the session or what you're hoping to do by managing your emotional and mental health. Okay, great. So it looks like a lot of people have some different goals there. People want to manage their mood, people want to find ways to cope, people want to deal with stressors. I think we all know that we want to sort of find relief or get through whatever we're going through. But for different people, that's going to look really different, exactly what they're looking for. Some people want really specific things. Some people just want to find some relief. Some people don't want to feel alone. So it's really inspiring that you were all able to sort of tap into what works for you and what you specifically need, because that's really important. Other people might tell you, this is what helped for me, or this is what I want out of my mental health journey, but it's something really personal. It's what do you specifically want to help you overcome what you're dealing with. So now that you kind of have a clear idea of what you want, we're going to talk about some practical strategies that you might have heard in Jordan's story, but some other specific ones to help you get there. So the very first strategy is to just let yourself think about the thought. The more we try to struggle against it, generally, the more our brain thinks that our thoughts are important and makes us think about it even more. So stop this cycle by just kind of letting the thought wash over you. Let it come. Don't try to grab onto it or change it or fight it or judge it or analyze what does it mean because I'm having this thought. Just say, okay, this is a thought. I have tens of thousands of thoughts every day. I'm going to let it come in and then I'm going to let it go. And it doesn't mean anything about me. It's not going to change my life. It's just a thought and I'm going to leave it there. Another thing that can be really helpful is doing this sort of exercise that you heard in Jordan's story, where you try to examine and challenge your thoughts. So here's how to do it. First, just identify the thought when it pops up. You can literally even say out loud, okay, here's that bothersome thought. Then notice what emotions it brings up for you. So a lot of times, first we have a thought and then we have an emotional reaction to the thought. So first, just notice the thought. Okay, here is XYZ thought. Okay, what emotions come up because I'm having that thought? Next thing to do is try to write down the thought. So put it into words. This helps you just get it out because when it's in our head, I think we spiral a bit. We start thinking about it more and more and more. and it just becomes this giant monster. Whereas if we write it down and we can see how kind of contained and small and manageable it is, you can see that it's this separate thing. It's not a part of you. It's just this small thing on paper. The next thing to do is to ask yourself if there's any concrete evidence that it's true. Is this something that I know as a fact? Is this thought a fact? Or is it, just a thought? Is it just something that doesn't have a lot of evidence behind it? So a lot of times we have these thoughts that are just based on assumptions or distortions. So look at the evidence that maybe contradicts it. Maybe there are some things that support it. Maybe it's, potentially true that you might struggle on your exam next week, but maybe that's also just an assumption. And there's some evidence like I've been studying really hard. I am, going to extra hours with my teacher. I was able to focus for 30 minutes on my reading. Maybe there's some evidence on the other side of things, and look for that evidence. And then finally, once you've looked at both sides of it, try to write down a more balanced and rational thought like, okay, my exam next week is going to be really hard, but I've had really hard exams before and it's been okay. So another piece that you can work on is going to be in this next slide here. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, sometimes we just need a break from these thoughts. We need ways to cope, to find relief and distraction. And this isn't avoiding what we're dealing with, but sometimes when we get into the whole sort of emotional part of our brain, things just escalate, our emotions escalate, things feel just worse and overwhelming, and we're actually worse at solving problems. So we need to switch back on our whole brain so that we can solve problems most effectively. And a really useful way to do that is to find some relief or distraction through coping skills. So you might have your own coping skills that work really well for you already, and that's incredible. You can click on some of these options and share those. Or if maybe you haven't tried a lot to find relief and distraction and maybe even a little bit of joy, you could read through this list and click on some that you might be able to try. Everybody go ahead and click a few. You click a number of different ones, or you can just click one that you want to focus on. Or if you have your own that's not on this list, just go ahead and click something else. I'll give you a couple minutes because there are a lot of joy in the same way. Work for different people. We don't all cope and manage and find joy in the same way. Okay, we'll just give everybody another second to read through and kind of try to say what comes some relief or distraction or just switch back on. Okay, great. So we've got a lot of different coping exercises here, and feel free to look at what other people have put as well. Maybe somebody wants to try building something. Try building something. So see, maybe, okay, this is my normal go-to, but I want to try something else today. Totally up to you. Great. Lots of different coping skills coming in. Lots of different things that people like. And I think that's just evidence that the different things work for all of us. There's no one size fits all way to cope with whatever you're going through. So today we've talked about how normal it is to have bothersome or intrusive thoughts. We saw evidence, literally, by everyone clicking, that every single person who joined this session is going through something, which is just proof that you're not alone. These uncomfortable thoughts are so common, and I think all of us being able to click that just shows that there's nothing wrong with us because we're having unwanted, upsetting thoughts or emotions. It just means that we're human, and it just means that we're here because we want to do something about it, and we want to feel differently or feel better in the future. We also talked today a bit about Jordan's story, and I think really notably we saw that when she told her friend about the thoughts, that they lost a lot of their power and they couldn't control her anymore. And then we went through some exercises about how to challenge negative thoughts, how to just let them wash over us instead of fighting them. And then just to wrap up, I think the last thing I'm hoping you all can do is just try to think of, as we're ending here, one specific thing that you can do today to manage. whether that's something that you want to borrow from Jordan's story that she tried, or one of the techniques that we practiced together, or something from the list of coping skills. It doesn't have to be everything we talked about today. Just one small thing to sort of move that needle towards coping and finding some relief from the emotions. I think it's just also really important to remember that you can always use Find a Helpline to search for a helpline in your country. Or if you feel like you're really struggling and maybe even unsafe right now, and it's safe to do so, you can contact emergency services or tell somebody who can help keep you safe today. You're also always welcome to join another session here whenever you need. So thanks so much for being here and contributing to this community. By being here, you've really helped a lot of other people. So thank you for that.